story which is simply called The Old Woman in the Forest. It's actually about a young maiden and a white dove, but the title is The Old Woman in the Forest. Of course, there's an awful lot of the brothers Grimm stories do happen in forests. And I suppose, of course, in the English tradition, a lot of the Robin Hood stories happen usually Sherwood. There was once a young maiden who was considered very beautiful, who worked as a servant. And one day her masters decided to go on a journey, so she travelled with them in a carriage. And as the carriage travelled through the forest, they were set upon by bandits, but I think maybe outlaws might be a better word, actually, set upon by thieves, vagabonds, outlaws. And the maiden managed to escape from the carriage and hid behind a tree and was left unharmed. But everyone else was killed by the outlaws, leaving the maiden alone in the forest. And as night approached, she realised that there was very little she could do except trust to fate. And it was at this point, I suppose her darkest moment, a white dove flew to her with a small key in its beak. And of course, because this is a story, the key is made of gold. The key in its beak, and of course the dove could speak to her. So the dove said, take the key to the tree over there, and you will find a keyhole. If you unlock the door in the tree, you will find there is food inside. So the maiden, because there was nothing else that she could do, took the key from the dove's beak, unlocked the door in the tree, and found indeed inside the tree was food. So she ate her fill. The following night, the white dove came to her with a with a key in its beak and said, go to that tree over there, unlock it, and you will find a soft, warm bed. And of course the maiden did as the dove suggested, and she found a soft, warm bed with crisp white linen sheets. Third night, the dove said, take this key, unlock the door in the tree over there, and you will find clothes. And not only did the maid find clothes, but she found the most beautiful gowns, far richer than anything that she had ever imagined she would ever wear. The fourth time the dove came to her, there was no key. There was simply a conversation. And the dove said, walk through the path and you will come to a small cottage. Go in the cottage, and there you will see an old woman. Ignore her. It doesn't matter what she says or what she does, ignore the old lady. Turn to the right, and you will find another room where there will be a table laden with many rings. Ignore all those. You are seeking one plain ring. Bring it to me. And because, of course, the dove had been so generous, the maid felt that the very least she could do was take the dove the ring. So she followed the path through the woods. And as the dove had said, there was a tumble-down little cottage, and the maid walked inside, and there was an old woman, probably pulling a shawl around her shoulders against the cold. And she said, who are you? Get out! Get out of my cottage. But the maiden ignored her. and turned to the right as the dove had said, and there, in another room, was a table laden with rings, and perhaps some were set with emeralds, some with diamonds, perhaps one with rubies, and she ignored them all, for she sought a plain ring. And the old woman came in, carrying a bird cage. And so the maid took the bird cage from the old woman, and inside it was a plain ring, and she just knew that that was the ring that she must give to the dove. So she grabbed the ring, ran past the old woman out of the cottage, and ran as fast as she could back to the place where the 3 trees were. And of course she expected that the dove would appear once more. And when the dove didn't fly to her, she was a little alarmed, and she leaned back against one of the trees. And yet, instead of the rough bark that she was expecting, the tree seemed warm and welcoming, and the branches seemed to wrap round her like welcoming arms. And when she turned round, she found, of course, it wasn't a tree at all, but a handsome, richly dressed young man. So the maiden gave the young man the plain ring, and he smiled, and he kissed her, and he thanked her for breaking the enchantment that the witch who lived in the woods had cast over him. And because this is a story, of course, the handsome young man was a prince. And I think that you can end this story, because I think you know how stories like this always end. And they lived happily ever after. But what became of the old woman in the forest? Perhaps she lives there still, so perhaps if you go through a dark forest, beware of outlaws, and beware of strange old women who live alone in tiny cottages in the middle of nowhere, for you never know who they might be. And if ever you go to a forest and you have a conversation with a talking bird, do tell me. Hope to see you again soon.